Good afternoon. I'm Frank Conkling, and this is the Panda Consulting ArcGIS workshop. This week, which is the last workshop of the year, we're going to take a look back instead of just always looking forward. And we've got a lot of people that are still in the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, and we've had questions come to us about, well, how do you handle this, or how do you handle this, or how do you prepare your data if you're looking to transition into other things? So we're going to go in and take a look at and answer any questions you might have on the ArcMap Parcel Fabric this week. So before we do that, I just want to go in and remind everybody that if you're looking for information about the Parcel Fabric or looking for information on some of the things that we at Panda Consulting do, you can always go to our website at www.pandaconsulting.com. And if you're there, you can look at our events calendar, which is the second link here. And you can see that in January, we've got one workshop already scheduled for January 6th, 2020. And then we've got another one scheduled for January 20th, which is the one on the 6th. We don't have any major topics yet. So if you want us to talk about something, please let us know. Shoot me an email and I'll try to take care of it. And then on the 20th, we're going to talk about why ArcGIS Pro 9 or 2.9 is the release in which you should be doing all your Parcel Fabric adjustments on there. If you don't like looking at it on the calendars, you can also go to our workshops and events page, which will take you and list them, all the upcoming ones. And then you'll notice the ones that are crossed out are the ones that we had just recorded. And on here, we give you access to the standard definition recording, or you can record, or you can download the high def recording. And these are all out on our YouTube page, which is also available here. And it brings us here. We now have, I believe it's over 60 or 62 hours worth of recordings here, all freely available. Thanks for commenting on them and giving us some feedback on them. Thank you for that, and we appreciate it. So let's start. The ArcMap Parcel Fabric, and you see it here on the screen. The ArcMap Parcel Fabric is a very structured type of environment, very structured type of data structure that's specifically set up for local governments. It uses in most cases, it uses a schema in which they go and, let's go and see if we can look at this schema a little bit more over here in the Arc catalog version of it, in which the fabric itself is really nothing more than 5 feature classes. One is specifically the control points for it. Another is line points, and line points are where you have a point which is supposed to be on a line, and that's a way they actually go in and create individual line points for that. Another is the lines associated with your data. And then you've got parcels, and you have a plan table on here. And then finally, you have points. It's actually a very interesting data model that was useful. But if you're coming from traditional and generic type of data structures, it was a little bit tough to understand, because what they did is all lines, every single line was stored in one feature class. And then there was attribution, which went and told you what type of line this was, and then more specifically what line it was, or what polygon it was associated with. If we look over here at the line feature class over here in the table of contents and open this up, you'll see that they have a type field there, which actually goes and shows you what type of a polygon this line is. And then as we go over further, we will see. I hope they still have it here. They don't have it showing at the moment. There also was some elements in here in which you could see. Let me see here. The 2-point and the front point. You could see the actual parcel ID that it was associated with. So it would have that this line here was going from point number 14 or point number 17 to point number 16. And then as we went down further to the actual parcel ID, and it was associated with the parcel that had the object ID of 3. So you could actually go and trace and figure out which lines went with which polygons, what points they were connecting up to. And it was a very interesting data structure. Did not rely upon topology. It relied upon all of these linkages and what's also called joins on here. And because of this reliance upon the relationship between the individual features and the points, if you did not maintain some of the spatial indexes and you didn't maintain the relationships between them very well, you could oftentimes go and get into trouble with your data. It would start slowing down. You would not be able to find things. So there was just sort of multiple ways in which it could break. You could have issues with it. But overall, I think it was a very, very nice structure on here. Again, it was different, and a lot of people struggled with it. With the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, it's gone and transitioned into more of a traditional type of feature classes using topology to go and make sure that everything's connected to one another. All right, so in addition to that, because all of the polygons were all stored in this one polygon feature class called Parcels, in order to go and create a table of contents that you could interact with, every single item in here. So again, this is control points are located here. Line points are located here. Lines are located in this feature class. Points are located in this feature class. But from this point down, all polygons, these are all polygons, they're all stored in this one feature class called Parcels. And it's differentiated by attribution on here. So if we look on the table of contents for the cadastral framework, we see that, in fact, it had a definition query against it and said the system end date is null. The system end date in this case was used to go and mark whether something was current or historic. And then it was either a type number 1, type number 2, or type number 3 or 4. Those were all the cadastral frameworks. They were PLSS townships, sections, quarter sections, and special surveys on there. And that's the way they set it up. So that, for example, if you had something, and this parcel fabric actually has some extended types, parcel types in here. If you had those extended parcel types, you had to go and create that in addition by, for example, by bringing in the polygons. And then on that polygon, you'd go and you'd set the properties for it and say that, in this case, the system end date is null. And the type is equal to, and in this case, we have historic PLSS townships. And let's do historic PLSS sections. And from that, you would then have this attribution, which would go and show you the historic PLSS sections. And it worked. It was just an extension of the standard types of table of contents. Again, it had to do with how well do you understand how this data model works, but there was lots of opportunities to extend it. So let's start by asking, are there any questions that anyone might have about this. And our chat window is open if you want to go and do that. I do not have a moderator today. So you also, if you want, can just go and open up your mic and ask me any questions on here. If not, I'm going to start asking you questions. So Ryan, let's start with you because I know you're only here for a while. I know one of the things that you did is you extended the ArcMap Parcel Fabric out to multiple ways of multiple different types of parcel types. Did you experience any problems with it or anything like that?
Yeah, so as like Frank said, I've extended our fabric out. I couldn't tell you, I think we end up now have like 25 different parcel types within our fabric. So it tells you how far we've extended it out. We've had some run-ins with, at that time, the naming field, because it was only 50 characters long.
Yes.
So about 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago, I tried getting Amir and them to acknowledge that 50 characters for a name field is too short. And they said they were going to address it, which they never really did. So, because it comes to be, plat names sometimes be longer than 50 characters or things like that. So that was really the only big hiccup we had was the name field.
Yeah.
And as I was doing all this extending too, this was before they even said you could really do extending. Amir and even Dan Stone and a couple others were like, "You're gonna break things. You're gonna break things. Don't do this. Don't do this." So that's kind of where I'm at. Nothing really broke when we did the extending. We added a bunch of fields, all kinds of things. Yeah, so nothing really broke other than, like I said, the biggest headache was the name field.
Yeah, and I should say that one of the issues that ESRI had with it was that they actually didn't develop the initial versions of the ArcMap. They actually bought it as a product from another company down in New Zealand, and it was that company that imposed those character definitions and to make sure that they fit in there. And the question was always, well, is there some sort of coding included within some of the business rules and some other things that it was hard coded in there because they always had to deal with, they were never quite sure whether or not that code would break something, or if you did something, it would break something else. So they were always trying to go and keep you to work within the confines of what they originally had. But again, it no doubt about it, it was always one of the problems with that. With the new Parcel Fabric, one of the things that, because you've got up to 250 characters with a name field, you could have always gone and just said, well, let's put a secondary field in there and go and populate that. But you didn't have the mechanism with attribute rules and things of that sort to automatically calculate it. But
Yeah,
it worked. It worked. It was a little bit tougher to work with.
well, and to add to that too, Frank, one of the biggest reasons they fought back so hard is that all these out-of-the-box applications that they would require massive overhaul of scripts in the program on the backside
That's
to
exactly
identify
right.
the name field be longer than what it is.
That's exactly
that was one of the
right.
biggest headaches too.
Yeah. Interestingly, with the new fabric, often you can actually hide the name field. It's not quite as dependent on the actual names on there because it's much different schemas. So we do have a question on here about the rejoins. Go ahead, Mr. Phillips. Okay, do you have a mic on here? So well, doesn't have audio, so we have to use the chat window. Okay, so let me go and just sort of start with this and say the way that the ArcMap Parcel Fabric worked is that you would go and create a new parcel. So let's say I'm in here, I want to go and do this, and I have to admit it's been so long. Here's my parcel editor. So here's a new parcel on here, and it would bring up this dialog box here, and I would tell it what my plan was. Plans become now records in the new one, what was my template, what type of parcel I was working on here, what an identifier was, and let's just say test. And then I would actually go and build lines, and I could say, you know, start here, and I could then give it bearings on here, 100 feet, and then I could go south, go south for 100 feet and go west for 100 feet, and then go north for 100 feet, and it would close up. And within the structure, this would in essence be a parcel, but it would not be joined yet. It would not be put in place. Now, as a surveyor, this is the way I think of things. So that when I'm done with this, I was like, okay, now what do I do with this? All right. I think of a parcel as being a series of lines on here. So once I'm done creating the geometry here, I would then go and say, keep this and then join it to the rest of my fabric. And I would tell it what points do these lines start on, whether or not I should be creating line points in here or not. So I would go and use a tool here, and I would say, take this point and move it over here, and this point and move it over here. All right. And let me see here. Let me go and just move this over here closer and tell it to auto join here. And I'm not sure why I'm not seeing any. Let me go and draw a box here. Box this tool and draw it. The line's not within the tolerance. It's been a long time since I've done this. So I could go in and join this. Now, the problem, and I think this is what George is talking about. And let me go and pull this out. And all right, let me go and sorry about this. Desktop, okay. I'm going to do this so that you can actually see this as we do it. So I'm going to go in here to my desktop, and let's see, here's my image that we're looking at. So one of the problems with these joins is that when you first create a join, if that join is not correctly joined up, and somehow you miss certain elements, or you put a join in the wrong place. For example, something like this, where you might have this corner that instead of being over here is actually being stretched down to here. What happens is that the initial geometry for that parcel polygon feature is stretch, and it has, the best way to describe it is it has a memory on it. So if you attempt to go and take something you first create and it's created incorrectly, and you attempt to rejoin it to someplace different, it doesn't want to regenerate that correctly. Let's see if I can go ahead and do that here. So if I take this and now go and say, let's rejoin this again, it gives me the opportunity to go and make additional joins on here. And again, so I could go and say, well, instead, maybe this has to go over here. All right. And you can see that it automatically is stretching this thing out and putting this in here. Now, when I go and say join this, it actually will create a new geometry for the polygon that I've built. And again, it retains that. So if I go back here again and say, okay, let's go back here and go to this one again and rejoin that again and let it go and open up the rejoin. All right, now if I say, well, wait a minute, this is not correct. So let's delete this one here. And I'm right clicking on these joins. I'm removing it and it's identifying it over here. And I'm doing that and removing it over here. When I do this, it sometimes will revert back or stretch out that old geometry on it. So it's not quite reflecting what I think I want it to do. So George, is that exactly what's happening with you, with your issues on here? Is that it's retaining that initial join on here? Okay. Yeah. How do you fix it? All right. Well, it turns out that there actually is a way to fix this. And on the parcel editor pull down, there's a thing called regenerate the fabric. And what this tool is supposed to do, and what it does, is it goes and analyzes the actual lines that are stored, not how you've warped those lines, but how those lines are actually stored in the database, and reconstructs the geometry for you of that. So it will allow you to go and take something that's been warped out and regenerate it. And this will often go and do it. Be careful, because if you don't have anything selected, it will regenerate your entire parcel fabric and try to redo it. This is assuming that, in fact, all your joins are correct when you go and do this. Oftentimes, what we found, and I see Brian's here today, Brian uses extensively the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, is that a better way to fix that is not doing a regen, but in essence going and doing what's called an unjoin. Unjoin just goes and pulls it out of there and sort of resets it completely. And then it opens up what's called the Parcel Explorer. Then you go in here and say, okay, now let's try joining this again and try resetting it that way. It's a little bit sticky. Again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But what's happened is that first initial join, it's sort of like when a duck gets born. The first creature it sees, it sort of is embedded, and it's looking for that. It's looking to go back to that every single time. And it's exactly what happens. That first join that it occurs on a parcel when you're going and building it, it's trying to retain that information all the time. So when I was teaching people how to go and use the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, I was always go and stress that more than anything else, where you have to be very, very important is you have to pay attention is the first join. Because often we would have people go in and having a parcel, they go in here and they would create a new parcel. And this new parcel would just be a bunch of lines. Maybe this was a golf course boundary, whatever it was. All right. And they would not pay a whole lot of attention to going and doing this and creating this first join. And they might do something like this and say, okay, well, I want to join here and I want to join here. And you know what? They would do an auto join or something else and let it try to go and analyze and figure out where to go and automatically put it. And a lot of times the auto join will take the closest point, not the correct point. And once you create that first time, once you create that geometry, it's really tough to break it again. You have to go and tell it, no, either regenerate this completely from scratch or unjoin it and then rejoin it again. this is one of the problems with the fabric, is that this fact that it sort of imprints that geometry as a result of that first join. So you want to be careful with that, especially on there. It's a good question. A lot of people have that issue on there. So do we have any other questions right away that somebody wants to have some help on, or someone wants to understand how to go and do something on here? One of the things we often have is that, well, I know that my fabric has some issues with it. How do I fix those issues? And there's a couple ways of doing it. If I go in here and I right click, this is, again, I'm in our catalog inside of ArcMap. And if I right click on the fabric itself, I see a couple things here. I can check my parcel fabric. And what a check does is it goes and looks through your fabric and your lines and gives you inconsistencies. It says things such as, you've got lines that are very short here, make sure you really want them, which is often densified curves. Or more importantly, you've got lines that don't connect up to points, because one of the structures is every line is supposed to be connected to points. There's supposed to be join information on here. Or because the curves inside of a parcel fabric consists of, let's go and create a new curve here. Let's see if I even remember how to do this. I go to parcel details, and let's say I want to go tangent to this, and not there. I want to go and make this a radius of 100 feet and core distance on here. So this curve, when I actually go and build this out, and let's go and put some other things on here. So there's something here. You'll see that when I build this, and when I keep it, what's actually being created is not just that boundary, not just that curve, but also inside the ArcMap parcel fabric. It always understood that this was complex geometry. And so it's going to create the curve, the arc length of the curve, but it's also going to create a radius line, the two radius lines, and it's going to create a radius point here for it, so that you've got curve geometry that has, again, additional components that you don't always see. And what this check parcel fabric does is it will go and test to see if you've got a curve defined, does it have a radius point on there? And do all of the radial lines exist on there? Are they correctly connected up? And that will allow you to go and run a check, and it will give you a list of all the problems you have with the parcel fabric. This is a fairly big parcel fabric. I don't want to go and do this right now. But it will go ahead and do that. Another thing you could do is you can do this inconsistent records. And what that will do is, and it depends upon whether or not you're in editing or not. And if I do that, it's going to tell me, no, it's already editing, so I can't do that. So it's going to go through here and check these. Again, sorry, there's 633,000 lines that it's going through. And this will attempt this fixing inconsistent records, will attempt to go and fix them. If you have, for example, points that are not connected to the lines, it'll go and fix them. Lines that have the same to and from point. Now remember, that line has an attribute that says it goes from this point to this point. If that's the same point, that's an invalid or inconsistent record in here. Lines that don't belong to a parcel. You cannot have a line in here inside the parcel fabric without a parcel, a polygon. Line points with invalid point references, parcels that have no lines associated with them, invalid feature adjustments, and such. And this would allow you to go and fix all of this In this case, I've got nothing connected to this. No problems with here, but you would be able to go and fix that for it. That's one of the things that you want to go and check quite often within here. All right. You always want to go and do that. Let's go ahead and cancel that out. So again, that was a inconsistent records, and I was doing a full scan on here. I could also go and do a focused scan, and again, tell it just specifically to go and look for the same to and from, and it keeps giving me the error message that I'm editing. And when I'm editing, I can check, but I can't correct. I didn't have any problems on here though, so not a problem with it. All right, there were 0 records in here. So those are a couple of tools in here, again, that you can use. And these are sort of ways that you can check the line structure, ways that you can check the overall structure to make sure that everything was put in place on here. That's check Parcel Fabric, and then the inconsistent records for full fabric scan and focused fabric scan. Those are both really important to keep and make sure that your parcel fabric is consistent and is working correctly. Another thing, by the way, anybody have any questions, just go ahead and put them over in the chat window. I will go and try to find them as quickly as possible and answer them. Another thing that this radius point here, this thing here, the fact that you have a radius point here, a lot of people have a question, well, how do I do a join if I have a curve here? And it's important that that radius point, and let's go ahead and create something here just so when we can demonstrate how this works. So let's go and create another parcel here. And this parcel we're going to put here, and we're going to make it, and I remember this one here had a radius of 100. Nope, wrong way. But I want to make it 105 so we can see there's a little bit of difference here. All right, so when I go and build this and I say, okay, well, this point goes here, this point goes here, this point goes here. And if I don't do anything with these two and I join them up, what I wind up with is 2 points there, because I in essence have 2 curves that I told it with the joins are supposed to be concentric with one another, but they're not. One's got a 100-foot radius, one's got a 105-foot radius, and you'll see this a lot. And the question that we have is, well, how do I fix this on here? And there are several ways to go and fix this. One is a quick, easy cartographic way to fix it. Another way is a deeper way of fixing it. The cartographic way is to go and use this tool called mean points. And mean points, I can tell it to go and take the 2 points that I put the box around, and this does it with any points, and mean them or average them out and replace, so that those points that were inside that box are now replaced by 1 point, and it is drawn so that these are now the same curves cartographically, even though they have stored separate information on here. So if I want to correct this, I then have to go to each of the curves that are on here and correct what they're supposed to be. So let's go and open this so that we can actually edit this. And on here, I'm going to say, no, this should be a 100-foot on here, and tell it to go ahead and save this on here so that now this is truly 100 feet on here. Let's go and, sorry. let's go in and do this one more time. And this time, let's join this again. Let's do a rejoin on this and make sure that it's also joining everything up here. So I'm going to draw a box around here and say, let's make sure that we join this here. And it says it's already in the same join. So again, curves can be problematic. One of the challenges always was, how do I know what curve that radius point actually connects up to? Because by default, Esri does not show you any of the lines that are radial lines in here. They actually hide them when you're doing this. So the only way to go and actually find out what's actually part of this is by doing what's called an open, in which you go and open it up and let it expose the geometry and where it's joined to and give you coordinate points on there. And at that point, it will show you what that's actually connected up to. All right. So it's again, you normally don't see these radial lines unless you tell it to go and open a parcel, and then it will show you the geometry that's associated with that one parcel on there. All right, let me go in here back to parcel details and see, close that out. All right, so George, to also go and look at this, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go and regenerate this again and see, and it regenerated it. Let's see if that made any difference. Let's unconnect that and let's rejoin this again. On here, make sure we only have one. Let's open up and see. You can see that that first join that I did still has this located in the wrong place on here. So again, it's just, you want to be careful when you make these first joins. So again, bringing back all the memories of how to actually go and manipulate this. One of the things that you can do is there is a function called transform parcels. And what transform parcels really does is it says, I'll allow you to go and move the points, move the definition of where the points are that define where this thing is located. So I can go in here and I can say, let's go ahead and move a parcel point. I can move an individual parcel point. And when I say save, it will move everything else that's connected to that point on here. So I can say save, and it's going to create a new center point because there's a curve here. All right, and it will go and move that. This is how topology was implemented inside of here, in that the polygons are defined by the lines are defined by the points, and the way you actually control the entire parcel fabric is manipulating the points that are in here. So if I wish to go and move or redefine where this parcel is located, I need to do a transform. Say, okay, let's go ahead and I can transform it where I move an individual parcel point in here, and I can move it over here, and it does not redefine or change the actual COGO information that's stored. Instead, it only goes and moves the actual graphic representation of where that line is. Once you understand how this works, it's actually not hard to work with, except there's limitations on what can you do. For example, I cannot take one point and put it on top of another point. Again, let's go and unselect this one here, and let's transform this one again and take this point, and I can't go and connect it up to that point, even though it just snapped. It should give me a warning on here and say you can't put 2 points on top of one another on here. Well, it actually allowed me to do that. I wonder if it actually did that. So if I go in and select here, and I look at my selection or attribution on here, I actually, let me go back here. Don't have any in here. My points, let's make my points selectable so I can see them again. So here are my points. It's actually only 1 point. So interestingly, and again, this is 10.8.1. That must have been fixed, because in the older versions of it, I could not transform 1 point on top of another point. Brian, have you, I know you're on here. I'm going to ask you, had you discovered that actually can work now? That you could transform on top of another point on here. So let's go ahead and transform again. Let's see if we can actually do this. I can take this point and snap it to here and say, go ahead and do that. This was, again, one of the major issues early on, was whether or not you could actually transform this on top of another point. It looks like I can. Let's see if I can select this. And I actually only have 1 point here. So looks like they actually fixed that. It'd been a while, a couple of years since I've actually used the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, and it's good job, guys. Esri, good job. So, so George is also asking, can you delete a parcel point? No, you cannot delete a parcel point. I think I know what you're asking about, George, is that, can I go and change a definition of a parcel? All right, so that if I have this one parcel here, how can I change it so that I delete this point and I replace it with some other geometry on here? All right, and again, by default, you can't just go in here and treat this as if this is a piece of normal type of graphics. It's not. It's actually the definition of 2 lines and a point on here. So in order to go and make this change, you would do what's called a construct from parent. And what construct from parent does is it allows you to go and opens it up so that you can edit and make changes on here. So that by default, I also want to go and say, show me all my existing lines in here. And if I wanted to go and create a new line, I could go in here and say, well, this line goes from here to here to here to here. All right, those are the lines in here. And at this line, I'm going to go on top of this line and say, make this line unbuildable. Don't build this line anymore. And make this line unbuildable. Don't build this anymore either. And let's see what happens if I go and say, take this and then mark the old one historic. All right, so it in essence deleted a line, but because of the way that it stores the geometries of the parcels, you can't go in there and use regular tools to just say, hey, delete this one. You can move around where that point is defined, but you cannot say remove it or change the geometry there unless you do a construct from, a construct from parent. Let me see. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking it will allow me to go and see this, but I can't, if I do an open, I cannot go and delete or add lines. Open will only allow me to look at the structure. I have to do a construct from parent to actually be able to go in here and say, redefine this. On here, let me go and take this one and not build this, not build that, not build this, not build this, and not build this. Now let me go and build this and mark the old one historic. All right. So recognize that it was originally set up. The original product that was purchased was set up for surveyors in which you define the boundaries of the line, boundary of the parcels, and those boundaries are set. So you can't treat this as if this is normal geometry. You actually have to go and recognize that it's going and storing a series of lines and then building a polygon from that and building those points associated with those lines from the individual intersections of those two lines on there. Again, if you understand that part of this, this is actually pretty easy to work with. It can be cumbersome if you're trying to go and restructure or refit parcels that have been migrated in that do not have correct geometry on them, because not just do you have that one, but you have the one next to it that you have to do. And if you have multiple layers underneath it, you have to do that for each of those. Often people will ask, well, now that I've got two parcels, because I actually have two parcels here. I've got this parcel and I've got this parcel. How do I clip one out of the other? In this case, I'm going to tell it to unselect this, and I'm going to do what's called a parcel remainder. I'm going to tell it to clip out this parcel from the one underneath it. All right. Now, what this is going to do is it told me here, those are the parcels that it intersected, and it now has gone and clipped out from the parcel underneath this new parcel that I just created. So I now have these two parcels. All right. And if I want to go and redefine this geometry in here, that's what I have to do this on both of them. I do have that ability to go and sort of move these. Say this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, and it will move everything associated with those points, but that's not replacing all the geometry. It's just moving the geometry. There's a lot of nuances built into this, a lot of things that you want to understand. If you understood and if you understand how it works, it's actually a very nice structure, but it's not what most parcel mappers think of when they think of parcel mapping. They think of more of the cartographic component. Again, this was set up differently for that. All right, let's see what else I can do here. If I go over to my table of contents again, historic parcels. Now, I actually listed a couple of parcels here as being historic, but because my table of contents has a definition queries associated with it, all right, for historic parcels, it says that the system end date is not null. That's fine. And then the type is a 7, type number 7 is a tax parcel, or the type is 9, type number 9 is an easement. or type number 6, which is a lot, often these won't show up. So, or not that they won't show up, but that often you'll have other elements on here that won't necessarily be part of this definition query. So often we'll just tell people, just take out those types and just make it where it's the other element on here, and then turn them on, and you'll see here's all of the historic parcels that I created that have been created on here. And you just want to recognize that there's a lot of things being generated in the background on here. The new parcels that are current, the historic parcels that are in there. You just want to be aware of that when you're going in and doing this. All right, we've got about 10 more minutes left. What other questions do we have, or what other things would you like me to demonstrate on here? Do we have anything specific that we want to go and look at? Again, there was extending the data model to include these other types of parcels. And how do you do that? If we go to catalog again, in the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, they are all defined, the types of parcels you have, by the LR parcel type. All right, and on there, here's the different types of codes that we have. And you can see down here that this county actually had this historic townships, historic sections, historic quarter sections on here. George also is asking, we've made some changes to rural and urban annotation settings. How do I make the latest annotation settings set as my default or delete old anno settings? George, you're talking about feature length annotation, and is that feature length annotation for the polygons, or is that feature length annotation for the lines? What type of anno settings is that on here? That was a little tough to answer without actually having the data in front of us, because this is all labels in here right now. It does have the ability to have anno. This parcel dimensions is actually here. These are, let's go and turn off the labels on here. This doesn't have any anno on here for the polygons. So let's start with this. Annotation in the ArcMap Parcel Fabric is not part of the Parcel Fabric. Rather, if you've got feature linked anno in here, and again, over here you can see there's the parcel dimensions. This is a piece of anno, all right? And this anno actually has a relationship class here. That's what this is here. This is a relationship class. And if we look at the properties of that relationship class, we can see that in fact, it's one-to-many, and it's taking the lines and the dimensions and storing them that way, so that as you create lines, it takes the COGO information and creates an anno from it. Same thing could happen with polygons. If you have a feature link annotation class for a polygon, it will be the same thing, in which you tell it to go and generate a, let's go and do that here. So for my tax parcels, I can tell it to go and convert my labels to annotation and just do it in my database for just the features in my current extent. And it will go and do that. All right. So there it is here. Let's go and turn the labels off here. Oh, turn the labels back off here. All right. So this is now annotation here that I have. Let's make sure they are selectable. Line dimensions are selectable on here. All right. So here's the annotation on here. And again, I would go in here and you can, there's the annotation on here. If I go in here and I change my parcel, because this is feature linked annotation. All right, notice it changed the symbology on here and changed it using that same labeling structure I had on here. Let's go and save these edits. Let's go in here and explore this a little bit more. Go to catalog and we will refresh this here. Refresh this, I think here. Should be able to see another Anno feature class, and this is from Parcels to the Anno here. So this is where it's actually creating it. Here's the rules that's being created. If I actually go to here, I can see what, where is it here? General. Here is the Anno feature class. And I can actually see here the expressions on what's being created on that. If I go to full pin, here's the expression that's being created on here. Let's see if I could just change that. I don't know if I'm actually editing right now to just put the name up there. Looks like I can't because I'm editing. I've got to stop editing on here. So in order to go and make those changes, and I think this is what you're asking, George, is that I go to the Anno, right click, go to properties, and I can then go and edit the expression. If I'm stop editing, I can edit the expression. Let's go and stop editing. Boom, go in here, properties, go to my expression, and I can change this expression so that this is just the name field. And there's also some SQL Server in here, some other properties on here that you want to go and set. So that's the way it gets set. So it's again, annotation is not part of the Parcel Fabric, but you treat it just like you treat any other feature linked annotation. You go in and you edit the annotation feature classes that are on here. So I go in here and I can edit this one, change the expression for this one, and change all of this on here. All right. Any other questions on here? All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and stop the recording and thank you all. Wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you so much. If you want, stick around and we'll just... Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277 and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.